Chosen one, the story begins with a moment that feels strangely deliberate, as though time itself pauses long enough for something important to be heard. Nothing outward may look extraordinary at first. The day may have begun like any other day, filled with the familiar rhythm of responsibilities, thoughts, and routines. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, something shifts. It feels as though heaven itself has leaned closer, interrupting the normal flow of life to deliver a message that cannot wait any longer. Moments like this do not arrive with noise or spectacle. They arrive with precision. A sudden realization appears. A sentence lingers in the mind longer than usual. A sense of urgency settles quietly in the spirit, difficult to ignore, and even harder to explain. The chosen one begins to understand that this interruption is not random inspiration or passing emotion. It is a summons. Something important has reached a point where silence is no longer possible. At the center of this moment lies a difficult truth. Some of what the chosen one has believed about their path, their timing, their safety, and even their understanding of progress has been incomplete. Certain assumptions once felt stable, almost immovable, because they were built through years of experience and survival. But stability does not always equal truth. Sometimes the structures we rely on most strongly are the very ones that quietly limit the future we are meant to step into. God now begins to bring correction. This correction does not come as condemnation. Heaven does not interrupt a life simply to expose failure or create shame. Instead, correction arrives as awakening. It is the gentle but undeniable realization that certain patterns, beliefs, or attachments cannot travel into the next chapter that is being prepared. Chosen one, what once felt secure may begin to shift. Situations that seemed settled may feel unstable. Familiar expectations about how life should unfold may suddenly lose their certainty. At first, this can feel unsettling, even disorienting. Yet the shaking is not destruction, it is refinement. When God prepares someone for a new season, He often begins by removing what cannot survive inside that future. Old assumptions, expired alliances, comfortable delays, and limiting beliefs must fall away because they cannot coexist with the clarity that the next chapter requires. This is why the moment carries urgency. The chosen one is not simply receiving encouragement to keep going as before. They are standing at a spiritual threshold where alignment matters more than comfort. The decisions made now will influence how quickly the next season unfolds. Delay, which once seemed harmless, now becomes a risk because hesitation can keep a person standing at the doorway of change without ever stepping through it. Heaven is therefore calling for three things at once: clarity, surrender, and movement. Clarity means seeing the truth without softening it to make it easier to accept. Surrender means releasing what once felt necessary but no longer belongs in the future being prepared. Movement means responding with action instead of remaining in contemplation indefinitely. Chosen one, this is not a moment designed to frighten you. It is a moment designed to position you correctly before the next season begins to move with speed. Heaven does not issue summons lightly. When it does, it is because something important is already in motion. And the life that waits beyond this threshold will require a version of you that is fully aligned with the truth now being revealed. Chosen one, the interruption that began this story is not accidental. It arrives with weight because something important must be addressed before the next chapter of your life can begin. Many people imagine that the doors God opens appear suddenly and effortlessly. Yet in reality, those doors often require preparation that is far more internal than external. Before a person can walk into a new level of purpose, certain structures inside their thinking must be corrected. That is why the interruption happens now. For a long time, you built parts of your life around beliefs that seemed reasonable. They were not obviously harmful. In fact, many of them looked responsible and practical. You learned how to survive, how to work within systems, and how to pursue stability in ways that felt wise at the time. You adopted definitions of success that made sense in the environments where you were growing. You formed habits that helped you navigate relationships, responsibilities, and expectations placed on you by others. None of these things appeared entirely false. But God now reveals something deeper. Some of those patterns were quietly moving you in the wrong direction. Chosen one, the danger of misalignment rarely appears as something obviously destructive. If it did, people would recognize it immediately and step away. Instead, misalignment often disguises itself as comfort routine and reasonable progress. A person can be busy, disciplined, and even productive while still moving further away from the deeper purpose placed inside their life. This is the unsettling realization the chosen one now faces. Some of the habits you trusted were not necessarily evil, yet they were incomplete. Some of the goals you pursued were not entirely wrong, yet they were too small for the calling attached to your life. Some of the attachments you maintained felt loyal and familiar, yet they quietly pulled your attention toward things that could never fully sustain the future God intended. In earlier seasons, those patterns may have helped you survive. They provided structure during uncertain times. They gave you a sense of control when life felt unpredictable. But survival patterns cannot carry a person into purpose indefinitely. God knows this. That is why correction arrives before the next door opens. Chosen one, imagine someone attempting to carry an old map into a completely new landscape. The map may have worked perfectly in the territory where it was first drawn, but once the environment changes, it becomes unreliable. If a traveler insists on following that outdated map, they will eventually become lost, no matter how carefully they follow its instructions. In the same way, God cannot allow the chosen one to step into a new season while still relying on patterns that were designed for an earlier chapter. This correction therefore touches several areas of life at once. Old beliefs begin to feel unstable. Ideas about what success should look like may suddenly seem incomplete. Goals that once motivated you lose some of their power because you sense that something deeper is required. Even relationships or environments that once felt natural may begin to feel strangely restrictive. At first, this can be deeply uncomfortable. Correction often disturbs what we have already made peace with. Over time, people learn to adapt to certain circumstances. They accept limitations that once frustrated them. They build routines around environments that may not be ideal, but at least feel predictable. Eventually, those compromises begin to feel normal. When God interrupts that normality, the soul experiences tension. Chosen one, this tension does not mean something has gone wrong. It means something important is being revealed. You may find yourself asking questions you once avoided. Why have I accepted this situation for so long? Why have I defined success in this particular way? Why do certain habits remain in my life, even though they no longer produce growth? Why have I tolerated environments that quietly drain the energy needed for my real purpose? These questions are not accusations. They are invitations to honesty. Correction begins when the chosen one is willing to look clearly at what has actually been sustaining their life. Not what appears stable from the outside, but what truly nourishes the soul and aligns with the calling placed within it. Many people resist this moment because it threatens the structures they have carefully built over time. It is uncomfortable to realize that certain foundations are weaker than they once believed. It is unsettling to admit that familiar patterns may no longer belong in the future being prepared. But divine correction is not destruction. Chosen one, correction is mercy. When God interrupts your routine to reveal misalignment, He is not rejecting your effort. He is rescuing your future. Think about the alternative. If the chosen one continued walking down paths that appeared stable but were quietly leading away from purpose, the consequences would not appear immediately. Life might continue moving forward in a predictable way for years. Responsibilities would still be fulfilled. Achievements might still accumulate. Yet something essential would remain missing. The deeper assignment attached to your life would remain unfulfilled because the structures supporting your daily decisions were never designed to carry that weight. God refuses to allow that outcome, so He interrupts. The interruption may come through conviction, through sudden clarity, or through circumstances that expose weaknesses in the patterns you once trusted. Situations that seemed comfortable may begin to feel restrictive. Habits that once felt productive may begin to appear distracting. Goals that once seemed meaningful may begin to feel strangely hollow. This is not confusion, it is illumination. Chosen one, God is shining light on the difference between what merely fills time and what truly fulfills purpose. And when that light appears, certain things cannot remain hidden any longer. You begin noticing how some activities keep you busy, but never move your life forward in meaningful ways. You recognize how certain relationships maintain emotional familiarity while quietly discouraging growth. You see how particular definitions of success may satisfy external expectations but leave your deeper calling untouched. The realization can feel heavy at first. After all, many of these patterns were built over years of effort. They are connected to memories, commitments, and identities you have carried for a long time. Letting go of them can feel like losing stability, but God sees something you may not yet fully see. Those structures could never hold the weight of your real assignment. Chosen one, imagine building a house on a foundation designed only for a small structure. As long as the building remains modest, the foundation may appear stable. But if someone attempts to add additional floors, the weakness beneath the surface becomes dangerous. God is strengthening your foundation before allowing the structure of your calling to rise higher. That is why correction arrives before opportunity. If the next door opened without this correction, the chosen one might carry the same old thinking into a new environment. The same habits that once limited progress would begin limiting the new season as well. The same attachments that once distracted your focus would continue pulling your attention away from purpose. God refuses to allow that pattern to continue. So he speaks now before the door opens. Chosen one, this moment is not about punishing you for past decisions. Every season of your life has played a role in shaping the person you have become. Even the patterns that must now be corrected served a purpose during earlier stages of your journey. But seasons change. What once supported survival cannot remain the structure that supports purpose. What once felt safe cannot remain the boundary that limits growth. What once seemed reasonable cannot remain the standard for the future God intends. Divine correction is therefore a sign of movement. God does not correct a life that has been abandoned. He corrects a life that is being prepared. The discomfort you feel now is the friction between the person you have been and the person you are being called to become. Old thinking resists release. Familiar habits attempt to hold their place. Attachments argue for their importance. Yet beneath that tension, something powerful is happening. Alignment is being restored. Chosen one, when this correction completes its work, you will not walk into the next season carrying confusion about who you are or why you are there. You will enter with clarity about what belongs in your life and what must remain behind. And the door that opens after this moment will lead into a future strong enough to carry everything God placed inside you from the beginning. Chosen one, when the story moves deeper into this moment of correction, it begins to illuminate something that has long puzzled your heart. There have been many nights when you asked questions that seemed to echo without answer. You wondered why your journey felt heavier than the paths of those around you. While others appeared to move through life with clarity and ease, your road often felt marked by silence, uncertainty, and long stretches where nothing seemed to move, no matter how faithfully you prayed. Those seasons were not imaginary. The pressure was real. The confusion was real. The tears that fell when no one else could see them were real as well. Yet what heaven now reveals is that none of those seasons were wasted. For a long time, the chosen one interpreted those years as delay. You believed you were simply waiting while life passed by. You thought perhaps you had misunderstood your purpose or missed a moment that could never return. When doors stayed closed and answers did not come quickly, the silence sometimes felt like abandonment. But the deeper truth is very different. Every difficult season was quietly expanding your inner capacity. Hardship has a way of strengthening parts of the soul that comfort can never reach. When life becomes difficult, a person is forced to look deeper within themselves. Surface confidence fades, and what remains is the true structure of the heart. During those seasons when you could not rely on visible results, you were learning to rely on something more enduring. Every delay sharpened your discernment. When answers do not arrive immediately, the soul begins searching more carefully. You start noticing patterns in people, environments, and decisions that once went unnoticed. You learn the difference between voices that guide and voices that distract. Over time, your perception becomes more precise, not because life became easier, but because pressure forced you to pay closer attention. Every disappointment exposed what could not be trusted. Certain relationships that once felt secure eventually revealed their limitations. Some opportunities that looked promising proved unstable. People who once appeared dependable showed themselves to be inconsistent when difficulty arrived. Each of those moments hurt, but each one also removed an illusion that might have remained hidden in easier circumstances. Chosen one pain often removes what comfort would allow to remain. That is why the story of your life resembles patterns found in so many sacred journeys. David was not placed on a throne immediately after being chosen. He spent years in wilderness, facing threats and uncertainties that refined his character, long before he was entrusted with authority. Esther lived quietly within the palace before the moment arrived when her courage would alter the destiny of her people. Joseph endured betrayal, imprisonment, and misunderstanding before the elevation that later defined his life. Their stories were never about random suffering. Each stage was preparation. The same pattern has quietly shaped your journey. During the seasons when you felt unseen, something significant was forming inside you. Your ability to endure without losing faith was strengthening. Your patience was deepening. Your understanding of people and circumstances was becoming clearer. The silence that once seemed empty was actually a workshop where character discernment and resilience were being formed. Chosen one, the world often measures progress through visibility. If growth is not publicly recognized, it is assumed to be absent. But heaven measures progress through transformation. The most important developments often occur in places where few observers are present. This means that your life was never random struggle. It was strategic preparation. Every time you chose integrity over convenience, you strengthened the foundation of your character. Every moment when you resisted bitterness after disappointment kept your spirit open to wisdom. Every prayer spoken during silent nights built a deeper connection between your heart and the voice of God. Pain was never the final message. Pain was training. What looked like abandonment was often refinement. When certain people walked away or opportunities dissolved, it sometimes felt like loss. Yet many of those departures were clearing space for something more aligned with your future. Environments that once felt essential were gradually removed because they could never support the life you were being prepared to carry. Chosen one. God often clears the ground before planting something stronger. And now the story reaches a turning point. The awakening that began with correction now moves toward personal reckoning. This moment is not about blaming yourself for past decisions or dwelling in regret. Instead, it is about seeing clearly how certain paths slowly bent away from the deeper alignment God intended for your life. When you look back honestly, you may recognize decisions that were shaped more by fear than by faith. There were moments when you chose safety instead of calling comfort instead of conviction. Certain compromises may have seemed small at the time, yet over years they gradually pulled your focus away from the direction your spirit sensed you should follow. There were also relationships that influenced your path more than you realized. Some connections offered familiarity, but quietly discouraged growth. Others provided approval that felt comforting, but came at the cost of authenticity. In those environments, it became easy to adjust your identity slightly in order to maintain harmony. Chosen one, these moments were not proof of failure. They were mirrors. Mistakes have a way of revealing what still needs healing or correction inside the soul. When you examine them with honesty rather than shame, they become powerful teachers. They show where fear once held influence, where conviction weakened, and where external pressure shaped decisions that should have been guided by deeper truth. God does not present these reflections to condemn you. He reveals them to recalibrate your life. Instead of drowning in guilt over what could have been different, you are invited to see the hidden mercy inside those experiences. If certain mistakes had never occurred, some lessons might never have been learned. If certain illusions had not collapsed, your discernment might never have sharpened to its current level. Chosen one, failure was never your final verdict. it was instruction. Through those experiences, you learned where your true strength must come from. You saw the cost of abandoning your inner clarity to maintain external peace. You discovered that certain attachments, however comfortable they once felt, could not coexist with the calling placed on your life. And now God is initiating something deeper than simple correction. He is initiating a reset. A reset does not mean your past disappears. Instead, it means the foundation beneath your life is being rebuilt so that everything moving forward stands on truth rather than compromise. Old thought patterns that once defined your identity are being dismantled. Emotional habits that once governed your reactions are losing their influence. False identities must also be released. For years, you may have carried labels that never truly belonged to you. Perhaps you accepted the role of the one who must always accommodate others. Perhaps you believed you were meant to remain in supporting roles while others moved forward. Perhaps certain voices convinced you that your potential was smaller than what your spirit quietly sensed. Those identities cannot travel into the next chapter. Chosen one, when God resets the inner structure of a life, He does not adjust it slightly. He rebuilds it from truth. This process requires surrender. It means releasing attachments that once felt normal. It means allowing new understanding to replace beliefs that once guided your decisions. It means accepting that some paths must end so that others can begin. But the reset also brings clarity. Instead of seeing your past through condemnation, you begin to see it through divine instruction. The confusion that once surrounded certain experiences begins to dissolve. Patterns that once felt chaotic now reveal their meaning. Even painful chapters start to make sense because you recognize how they shape the wisdom you carry today. This is the crossing point. The chosen one moves from confusion into spiritual authority. Authority does not come from perfection. It comes from understanding. When someone has faced their own mistakes honestly and allowed correction to transform them, their insight becomes grounded in experience rather than theory. Chosen one, that authority is beginning to emerge within you. The years of questions are giving way to clarity. The patterns that once repeated without explanation now reveal the lessons they carried, and the life that once felt unstable is being recalibrated around a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. The awakening that began with interruption is now becoming transformation. And from this point forward, your steps will no longer be guided by confusion, but by the alignment that comes when truth finally becomes the structure of your life. Chosen one, the story now moves into a stage where awakening can no longer remain only internal. For a long time, the work happening inside you was quiet, almost invisible. It was the kind of transformation that took place in reflection, prayer, endurance, and private correction. But there comes a point when inner alignment must begin shaping outward movement. That moment is where you now stand. A new order is taking shape. This does not mean simply that circumstances in the world are shifting. It means that the structures, patterns, and priorities that once defined the previous season are beginning to rearrange themselves. Certain ways of living that once felt normal are no longer sustainable. Systems that relied on distraction, surface living, and borrowed stability are gradually losing their influence. In their place, something different is emerging, something more honest, more demanding, and more aligned with deeper truth. Chosen one, the message makes one thing unmistakably clear. You were not prepared merely to observe this change. You are not meant to stand at a distance and watch what God is doing in the world while remaining unchanged yourself. Your life has been shaped in such a way that you stand within the movement of this new season, not outside it. Everything that has happened to you, the years of correction, the hidden preparation, the refining pressure, has positioned you inside this unfolding moment. That realization carries both honor and responsibility. Being chosen is not decoration. It is not a label meant to make someone feel important while they remain passive. It is a calling that carries weight. A chosen life is one that must move when God moves, speak, when clarity is required, and stand firm when others hesitate. For many years, you may have wondered why your journey demanded more endurance than you expected. Why did your path include such long seasons of shaping while others appeared to advance more easily? Why did your life feel as though it was being prepared for something you could not yet see? Now the reason begins to emerge. Chosen one, you are not being trained for comfort. You are being prepared for influence. Influence does not simply mean leadership in the visible sense. It means carrying a presence that directs attention back toward truth. It means living with such clarity that your life becomes a signal in environments where confusion has become normal. When others are lost in distraction or surface level living, your steadiness becomes a point of reference. That is why this new season will stretch you. The stretching will not always feel comfortable. Familiar supports may shift or disappear. Certain people who once walked beside you may fall away because the path you are entering now requires a different alignment than the one they are willing to embrace. Situations that once felt predictable may begin changing quickly, forcing you to move with courage rather than relying on routine. Yet this stretching is not punishment. Stretching is a sign of awakening. Inside every person, there are capacities that remain dormant until circumstances require them to come forward. Strength often sleeps until pressure calls it awake. Wisdom often develops through responsibility rather than theory. The same is true for calling. Many aspects of purpose remain hidden until a person is willing to step forward into environments where those gifts must operate. Chosen one, something within you is now being called into full function. The patience that once helped you endure silence is becoming the steadiness that will guide you through uncertainty. The discernment that sharpened through past disappointments is becoming the clarity that allows you to see through confusion when others cannot. The endurance that formed during difficult seasons is becoming the resilience that sustains you when pressure rises. You are being asked to move. This is the challenge of this moment. Reflection has already done its work. The years of thinking, questioning, and internal wrestling have prepared you for this point. Hesitation belonged to earlier versions of your life when uncertainty still held too much influence. But the person standing here now has already seen enough, learned enough, and endured enough to move forward with conviction. Chosen one, the call now resembles the moment Moses faced when standing before the sea. The path ahead looked impossible. Water stood in front of him, while the pressure of pursuit closed in from behind. If he waited for visible proof before moving, nothing would have changed. The sea did not part before he stepped forward. The movement came first. The miracle followed obedience. Your moment carries the same principle. You may not yet see how everything will unfold. You may not have every answer or guarantee, yet the call is clear. Move in alignment with what God has already revealed. Action does not require complete certainty. It requires trust. And that leads directly into the final movement of this section, where the environment around you may begin to feel unstable in ways that are difficult to explain. Chosen one, before transformation settles into place, everything that once appeared solid often begins to shake. This shaking can affect many areas of life at once. Relationships may shift unexpectedly. Emotions may intensify as old patterns surface and demand release. Assumptions about the future may dissolve as new possibilities begin appearing where none seemed visible before. At first, this can feel like chaos. You may look around and wonder why so many things that once felt stable are suddenly changing. Situations that once appeared secure may begin revealing cracks. Structures you once trusted may lose their reliability. Yet heaven describes this shaking differently. It is purification. When God prepares a new season, He does not simply add something new on top of old foundations that cannot support it. Instead, He exposes what was never meant to continue. The shaking reveals weaknesses that must be removed before stronger structures can rise. Chosen one, what is breaking now was never meant to last. Some relationships are ending because they were built on compatibility rather than shared calling. Certain emotional patterns are dissolving because they were tied to survival rather than identity. Some comforts are disappearing because they kept your life centered around stability instead of purpose. The storm is not proof that everything is falling apart. It is the fire clearing the land. Before new growth emerges, the ground must be prepared. Old structures must be removed. Illusions must be exposed. The process can feel intense because it touches areas of life that once felt secure. But beneath the pressure, something powerful is happening. You are being activated. Activation means that the qualities God placed inside you are no longer meant to remain potential. They are meant to become function. Discernment must now guide decisions. Faith must now shape action. Courage must now replace hesitation. Yet activation also requires release. As fear, anxiety, and uncertainty rise to the surface, you are invited to let go of everything that once kept your life off center. Old regrets that quietly shaped your identity must be surrendered. Beliefs formed through past disappointment must be replaced with truth. Self-blame that once held your confidence hostage must be released. Even bitterness must go. Chosen one, none of these burdens belong in the future you are stepping into. They were part of earlier chapters' lessons that shaped you, but were never meant to define you permanently. Now the moment of activation arrives. You are not being led here simply to feel understood or comforted by the story of your past. You are being summoned to move into the future it prepared you for. The first step may seem small. It may appear almost ordinary from the outside. Yet what matters now is movement. Faith must become visible. Chosen one, the time for preparation has carried you this far. What comes next requires action shaped by trust. The door ahead may not yet be fully visible, but the path opens the moment obedience begins to move. Chosen one, the story closes by returning to the truth that started this moment of interruption. This message did not arrive by accident, and it did not come merely to offer comfort. It arrived because heaven refuses to allow you to drift one step further into misalignment when a greater calling is already pressing against your life. What felt sudden, even unsettling, was not chaos invading your path. It was mercy stepping in before the next chapter begins. The disruption you felt was not destruction. It was protection. God was not exposing what was wrong in order to shame you or reopen wounds from the past. He was revealing what needed correction so that your future would not be built on unstable ground. What seemed like confrontation was actually rescue, the quiet but firm hand of heaven, redirecting you before the road ahead narrowed any further. Now, the chosen one stands at a threshold that cannot be ignored. Behind you is the life you endured, survived, and learned from. Ahead of you is the life you were always meant to inhabit. The difference between those two worlds is not time alone, but truth. Once truth enters the room, old illusions lose their power. The patterns that once felt normal can no longer remain unexamined because clarity has already begun its work. Chosen one, you do not leave this moment the same person who entered it. You leave awakened. You leave humbled by correction, yet strengthened by the mercy behind it. And you leave ready not to hesitate in the old patterns, but to move when God says move.